Sustainability, of course, is a goal which all of us in our various professions are trying to achieve. But even though I was trained as a chemist and then I meandered my way through the social sciences, what I soon discovered was that ultimately conflict trumps everything else. And we live in a world where if you use the word security, you'll get the job done immediately, right? And so no matter what you might try to invent or innovate, as Arundhati Roy has very commendably said, no one has been able to overtake the infinitely inventive art of human hatred, which seems to take over everything else. And so in much of my professional career, I've tried to find ways and how we can use our learning from other disciplines and reconfigure them around issues of peace building. And I should mention that this title itself is very provocative. The use of the term peace is in many circles still considered taboo, because immediately people think that you are talking about something that is utopian. It's an ideal which cannot be achieved, and somehow it's the realists, the people who really know how to deal with the tough guys. They're the ones who are living in reality. And those of us who aspire for peace are in La La Land. Well, I'm here to tell you that peace is pragmatic. Peace is possible, and peace is the only way to getting what else we're trying to achieve as well. And so please bear with me and consider this from a pragmatic perspective, not from a utopian perspective. Now, let's think about businesses. Since TED tends to cater especially to the business audience, I'd like to mention, I'm going to give you some vignettes and I'm going to pose a couple of questions. What does a cement company have to do with peace building? Any thoughts? Well, a cement company near this troubled land, this photograph is from a borderland to the south of our wonderful country, the United States. This is a picture near the Tijuana River estuary on the border between California and Mexico. And here we have an image of tremendous inequality, of one ecosystem which has been demarcated and dissected by the security imperative, because we are living in a world of such structural inequality, which we are afraid to grapple with, right? A cement company in Mexico realized that this is a very difficult situation for them to operate in, because they have various operations on the Mexican side and have had to contend with constant security problems, right? So they invested in trying to think about how we can eco-regionally think about peace building. They worked with Conservation International to develop a program on transboundary conservation. Okay? So businesses are realizing too that peace is pragmatic. What does a mathematician have to do with peace, right? This question was asked to me 6 months ago when I was giving a keynote presentation at Tel Aviv University, which in itself is a parable for a Pakistani American to show up in Israel to give a presentation, but I shan't digress. But the rector of the university introduced me with due respect, but he put in this little afterward saying, and I do think that peace is not really going to be possible in this context. And as a mathematician, of course, I don't know anything about peace. So he did make that caveat. And I said to him, sir, here's a mathematician, Anatole Rappaport, who spent his career as a mathematician and then realized again that peace was ultimately a goal which we must allow to permeate in all of our professions. And the last book which he wrote was titled Ecological Peace. He was a Jewish American who devoted his life to the study of peace, and he also connected it with mathematics, because game theory tells us how environmental issues can be used for peace building as well, right? So what do we do? Think about what we have on our planet. These dots are not the usual ones you have with malaria epidemics and so on. These are dots which are showing transboundary conservation areas which exist in borderlands, political borders, which we have decided that these are the countries that exist. In the case of Africa, decided in post-colonial times by the Berlin Conference, often making no ecological sense, right? But these protected areas have arisen as a hopeful sign that in border zones, people are realizing that there are vitally important ecosystems. but they're not managed well. And we are not really grappling with the diplomatic potential of using those transboundary conservation areas in regional peace building. The State Department and all of our wonderful diplomatic apparatus has this potential opportunity to think about the ecological constraints that exist and how we can use those to resolve conflicts. And that's what I'm trying to say. Connect the dots with existing mechanisms and management systems to move forward. Okay? Here's an example. Tomorrow I'm heading off to Ecuador to think about some of these areas with an organization called ITTO. Any thoughts on what ITTO might stand for? It's the International Tropical Timber Organization. It's a group of timber companies and governments which got together several years ago to form an international organization to grapple with issues of deforestation, right? And ITTO has realized, again, the importance of peace building in their work, and they helped to negotiate an agreement between Ecuador and Peru over a territorial conflict that lasted several decades in the Cordillera del Condor region, where both countries had been engaged in armed conflict for decades over this very pristine part of the Andean forest system. And they realized that we're fighting over what? We are fighting over a resource which is being degraded and depleted to the detriment of both sides. And so Ecuador and Peru, Ecuador down there, flag, Peru up there, they got together with the help, in one rare case, of US mediation actually working, and the US and the Brazilians, I think the Brazilians had a lot to do with it working better there, they got together and they negotiated an agreement whereby the environment was a central part of the peace-building apparatus. The conflict was not over the environment. That's the beauty of the argument here with environmental diplomacy, is the conflict could be over something else. But the environment is something which can instrumentally be used to resolve the conflict. And in partnership with NGOs such as Fundación Natura, they were able to negotiate a peace treaty where the environment was central to the agreement itself. And it has helped the business interests and it has helped the cause of conservation. So let's think about walls. Walls do exist. You know, this is an image of, again, going back to our southern border. We live on the northern pristine border here with Canada, but that also provides us with much more opportunities for lesson drawing. Perhaps the border here is also not pristine, but it's at least much more peaceful. In the case of the southern border, here's an image again of that same wall, which has been built all the way into the Pacific Ocean, lest the Homeland Security fear that someone will wade across the Pacific into the US. And what I found so compelling about this image is that you have these birds merrily flying across the border, because natural systems, no matter how much we try to constrain them, they will defy physical borders that may be placed by humankind. And I was reflecting on this, and since our host is an English professor, in his honor I would mention that, you know, the poem by Robert Frost came to mind, Mending Walls. I don't know if any of you have read that poem, and it's this tension which Frost is grappling with in terms of boundaries and how we deal with it. And he says, something there is that does not love a wall. Right? And his neighbor is constantly building the wall at the end of the winter. And the winter ends in the New England winters. And he says, well, you know, good fences make good neighbors. And this is the real tension which we are grappling with. If you bring the environment into the equation, you can tell the neighbor that, you know, good fences won't make good neighbors in that context, because they will be an impediment to so much else in terms of ingenuity, in terms of conservation. So that's where we need to go. Some palpable examples of what I'm trying to work on at this level. There's an organization called the DMZ Forum. I'm on the board of these two organizations up front, and I would encourage you to further study them and see what lessons we can draw from them, and welcome your guidance there too. where we're trying to focus on the North-South Korea conflict and see how we can use the environment as a peace-building mechanism in the context of the demilitarized zone. The economy has already been used as a peace-building gesture, but in a very utilitarian way. There is an industrial park on the North Korean side, which the South Koreans have been funding, and even with this current tension, there's still the activity going on. But on the ecological side, there isn't much which has been going on, and we've been calling for that in that context. There's another organization which we're trying to use environmental peace building in the context of education, environmental education. And the founder of this organization is currently in Iraq working on environmental education as a peace-building tool between Shias and Sunnis. And I'm happy to support his work in that context. We're trying to develop an atlas of ecological cooperation, and the first step in that is working with the International Community Foundation in San Diego and working in the context, again, of that border region, which is such a high-stress area. We're going to have the first community mapping exercise as part of the World Knowledge Dialogue in Geneva later this year. And we're focusing on an urban case study of Cyprus, the city of Nicosia, which has been divided, sadly. It's a World Heritage Site which has been divided by another very acrimonious conflict. And we're trying to develop a program by which, again, environmental planning can be used as a peace-building gesture. And it's very opportune that Hiroshima was mentioned also by our host. This is an image, the closing image I have is of a monument from the Nagasaki Peace Park in Japan. The relations between Japan and the United States are metaphorical in so many ways. They show how restoration can happen. Imagine a country on which 2 atomic bombs were dropped and about 250,000 people were killed within a week, and now you don't even need a visa to go to Japan as US citizens. You can have restoration, you can have healing of wounds within a matter of a lifespan. And you can have the city of St. Paul donate a sculpture called Constellation Earth to the Nagasaki Peace Park. It shows that restoration is possible at a human level and at an ecological level, and that's the message of Anatole Rappaport, with which I'll end this exposition. Thank you.